Well, a very good evening, everyone, and thank you all very much indeed for joining us this evening. My name is Michael Moran. I'm president of the Irish American Bar Association of New York. I'm an attorney at Sherman and Sterling here in New York City. And we are delighted to have you all joining us this evening virtually in New York for what is truly a very international celebration of Bloomsday. On behalf of the board, I want to welcome everyone most sincerely. We're delighted to have you all. And before we begin, I would like to just note two things. The first thing I would like to note is that we had this week, yesterday, the passing of Brooklyn Federal Judge Jack Weinstein, of the Eastern District of New York. So we want to pass on our condolences to Judge Weinstein's family and friends. And also, today we remember the Berkeley balcony tragedy, which happened 6 years ago today. So we remember all of the people involved in that incident. Well, as I think I mentioned, this evening's program is the 11th annual celebration of Bloomsday. and our second virtual celebration. And we're especially delighted to be joined tonight by the founders of this celebration, Jane Ann Murray and Janet Walsh, who are joining us. And as you have seen in the invitation, we have a very exciting schedule lined up for the next 45 minutes or so. We'll have some live theatre from Dublin, as well as a conversation with Colin Murphy, playwright. We'll have music from Minnesota. You've already heard some of that. And then this year's keynote speaker is Professor Catherine Flynn from UC Berkeley, who's joining us from California. So to kick things off, I would like to introduce you to Casey Sullivan. Casey is the regional director at Concilio, and Concilio are our sponsors, exclusive sponsors for tonight's event. It wouldn't be possible without them. So I will hand over to Casey now and ask him to say a few words on behalf of Concilio.
Thank you very much, Michael. Hello, everybody. Us at Concilio are very happy and proud to be a sponsor of the Irish American Bar Association and would like to support the organization's initiatives in the future as well. I don't know if anyone knows a whole lot about Concilio, but Concilio is a global leader in e-discovery, document review, risk management, and legal consulting services. We've been around for about 20 years, and through Concilio's complete suite of capabilities, the company supports global corporations, multinational law firms, you name it, we're there. And we have innovative softwares, cost-effective managed services, and a deep experience in legal and regulatory expertise. Concilio's e-discovery experts leverage best-in-class technology and create custom workflows to increase efficiencies and reduce e-discovery costs and legal spend. I don't want to take too much of your time, but that's kind of just what we do. We're very excited to be on sponsor this organization. If you have any specific questions about the company, feel free to reach out directly to me or just visit concilio.com. And with that, Michael, thank you again, and I'll hand it back to you.
Great, thanks very much, Casey. And again, a special thanks to Concilio for making tonight's event possible. Thank you very much indeed. All right, next we turn to Dublin, where we're joined by Colin Murphy. Colin is a playwright, screenwriter, and journalist. He's written a new play that's inspired by what has become known as the greatest literary trial of the 20th century. That's the United States versus one book called Ulysses. And so, as many of you will know, this famous 1933 decision by Judge John Woolsey, it's frequently cited as one of the most erudite and discerning affirmations of literary free expression. And of course, it portrays James Joyce's role in forging and solidifying First Amendment protections in the United States. So I will hand over to Colin in Dublin now to introduce what we're about to see.
Thank you, Michael. I'm off mute. Yeah, good. So good evening, New York. It's lovely to be joining you from Cabra in Dublin. We're going to perform a 10-minute excerpt from this, my new radio play. And we're going to cut straight to the chase and come in at the culmination of the court case. The defense attorney, Maurice Ernst, has spent all day trying to keep Molly Bloom at bay. He doesn't want to get caught up in defending the precise alleged obscenities in Ulysses. But under pressure from the prosecutor, Sam Coleman, and from Judge John Munro Woolsey, he finally has to confront the reality of Molly's soliloquy. And that's where we come in. Company, I see your cameras are on. Will you make sure your mute is off? And I will hand you all over now to Judge John Munro Woolsey himself.
I remain much worried about the episode at the end of the book, Mr. Ernst. The so-called soliloquy of Molly Bloom.
Yes.
This case is not about Molly Bloom, Your Honor.
This case is all about Molly Bloom.
This case is about our freedom as readers to encounter ideas, thoughts, forms of expression that are new to us.
Your Honor, I do not want to encounter somebody with a Tommy gun, even if that experience might be new to me. It is the responsibility of the state to protect the public from harm.
From physical harm.
Harmful ideas can be as damaging.
How are we to test the ideas we consider worthy except by encounter with those we dislike?
Mr. Ernst speaks for the writers and intellectuals who get such pleasure from provocation, Your Honor, the select few, he called them. But the government has to think of the more vulnerable of our citizens who may well be influenced by the licentious behavior that this book promotes.
He must have come 3 or 4 times.
This is paternalism at its worst, Your Honor.
With that tremendous big red brute of a thing he has.
Be that as it may, Mr. Ernst, the court is concerned about this episode.
The episode is known as Penelope, Your Honor, a reference to the Odyssey. Penelope has waited faithfully for 20 years for her husband's return from the Trojan War.
Molly Bloom, on the other hand, has spent her day having extramarital sex. Let's not get deflected again by Mr. Ernst's literary tangents.
I thought the vein, or whatever the dickens they call it, was going to burst.
Molly's soliloquy represents the vagaries of consciousness, Your Honor.
Still, he hasn't such a tremendous amount of spunk in him, considering how big it is.
But do we want our more impressionable young citizens to encounter that consciousness, Mr. Ernst?
Yes.
Suppose that a girl of 20, or 18 even, picks up Ulysses. What will she read?
When he made me spend the second time tickling me behind with his finger.
What might she learn?
I was coming for about 5 minutes with my legs around him.
I don't think that is the standard we should go by, Your Honor.
Oh, Lord.
It is the standard set by precedent.
I wanted to shout out all sorts of things.
The law does not require that adult literature be reduced to mush for infants.
Fuck or shit or anything at all.
The law requires this court to protect the vulnerable from being corrupted.
I'll tighten my bottom well.
It is destroying books that will corrupt us, not
Let
reading
out a
them.
few smutty words.
Joyce brings forth those things which we dare not even say to ourselves.
Smell rump or lick my shit.
He invades the secret places of the imagination.
Or the first mad thing comes into my head.
He casts light into the murky chambers of the human mind.
He could stick his tongue 7 miles up my hole.
It is only by such exposure that we can hope to banish darkness and taint.
That is what disturbs me, gentlemen.
What else were we given all those desires for, I'd like to know?
This soliloquy.
It didn't make me blush. Why should it either?
It may well represent the moods of a woman of that sort.
It's only nature.
I seem to understand it.
It's well for men, all the amount of pleasure they get off a woman's body.
I'll confess, this book leaves me bothered, stirred, and troubled.
That is exactly the effect of Ulysses, Your Honor. You haven't used the adjectives shocked or revolted.
If that passes for a legal argument, Your Honor, I think Mr. Ernst is clutching at straws.
Mr. Ernst, have you actually read Ulysses?
I'll admit, Your Honor, I struggled with it. I was trying to read it on Nantucket this summer.
Ah, I was on Long Island.
And I was in a basement office in the New York County Courthouse. I'm not certain what Mr. Ernst's vacation has to do with this, Your Honor.
Perhaps if Mr. Coleman got out of town a little more, his intellectual horizons would be a little broader.
Objection.
Let's not add to the heat in this courtroom unduly, Mr. Ernst. You were on Nantucket?
Yes, and I was invited to give a talk to the Unitarian Church.
On Ulysses?
On banking.
I'm afraid you've lost me, Mr. Ernst.
Well, I addressed about 400 people. I was fully intent on what I was saying. It was complex stuff. And still, when I finished, I realized that while I was talking about banking, I was also thinking at the same time about the long windows on the walls, the clock at the back, the painted dome above, the old gray woman in the front row, the baby in the rear, and a myriad of items unrelated to banks or even to my conscious mind. I returned to my reading of Ulysses with a new appreciation of what Joyce does in Ulysses.
Which is?
The stream of consciousness in words.
More literary non sequiturs.
Please, proceed, Mr. Ernst.
And now, in court, Your Honor, while I was thinking only about Joyce and Ulysses and free speech, I must confess that I have also been thinking, if that's even the word for it, about the gold ring around your tie, how your gown is slipping off your left shoulder. And these unbidden thoughts then summoned images long forgotten of my days measuring customers for shirts as a salesman in Brooklyn, and other stranger images. I fear my advocacy today may have been the lesser for my distractedness, Your Honor.
I confess, Mr. Ernst, that while listening to you, I have also been thinking about the particularly fine Hepplewhite chair behind you. Very interesting individual, Hepplewhite.
Around that time of Chippendale, wasn't he, Your Honor?
You know, his fame stems from his book on cabinet making and upholstery.
Ah,
But of course, he had been dead 2 years by the time it was published.
of course.
But we digress.
The stream of consciousness.
Yes, indeed.
Judge, that is Ulysses. It records the doubts and fears, the joys and torments, the swirling consciousness of Leopold and Molly Bloom and those around them. The sex is there, of course, but sex is part of our existence. We can no more say that Ulysses is obscene than that life or thought is obscene.
Thank you, Mr. Ernst. Thank you, Mr. Coleman. It's been a long day. I shall rise to consider my decision.
Yes.
To be continued. That was Janet Moran as Molly Bloom, Morgan Jones as Judge Woolsey, Stephen Hogan as Morris Ernst, and Killian Scott as Sam Coleman. And you can catch the full 50-minute play, The United States versus Ulysses, on the website or podcast streams of RTE Drama on One. Thank you very much.
Wow, that was absolutely fantastic. What a wonderful performance, and especially given how late it is in Ireland. So we really appreciate that. It was wonderful. Thank you. And Colin, so maybe I can have a couple of words with you now about the play in general, and you know, what inspired you to write this piece?
Well, it was a chance encounter, Michael. As it happened, I was reading Ulysses very belatedly for the first time during the last lockdown, and I bumped into a fellow called Des Gunning, who'd be a well-known Dublin Joycean. He was one of the founders of the Joyce Centre here. We bumped into each other actually on Crossguns Bridge, which, as it happens, is mentioned in Ulysses. And he told me he'd been talking to the Joyce Centre about wanting to look at the Woolsey case and do something with it, some kind of event or something. And I hadn't known about the Woolsey case. He told me about it, and you know, it sparked an idea immediately. I tend to write documentary drama, so what I like doing is taking true, normally Irish political, historical Irish stories and dramatizing them. And so this was right up my street. And so I took it from there, really. The Joyce Centre came on board, did an initial version for them, and then RTE came on board and did a new version for radio, which has just been released.
Wow, that's fantastic. And how accurate would you say the play is? Like, is it all true? What was your resources in terms of putting it together?
Well, I mean, I think it's probably pretty accurate. So there aren't actual transcripts of the court case, but there's a very good collection of legal documents and documents around it that was published in the 1980s. In fact, I was partly inspired by this, which is a terrific novel by Declan Dunn called Set at Random, and that's his fictionalization of the court case, and he was the one who put me onto some of the sources. I would like to think the reimagining of the case is pretty accurate. I've used a lot of quotes where they were available, but there's also a lot of my words in it, and even in that section you've just heard there, there's definitely a little bit of me knocking up against today's debates on censorship and maybe using some of that language. So it's a history play is never just about the history, it's always about the current, the present as well. So there's a bit of both in there.
Yeah, wow, fantastic. And obviously the play, the case originally happened here in New York. So are there any plans that maybe at some point the play might be produced here in the city of New York?
Well, we'd love to. So next year, obviously, as everybody is aware, I assume, is the centenary of Ulysses. So it's a big year for it, and what better year than to put on a play about how the novel actually got published. So the next step is to develop a stage version, which myself and the director Colin Morrison will do here in Dublin, and then I'd be really optimistic about bringing it to New York at some point next year. I mean, it's lovely to have, obviously Joyce is so Dublin, but this is a New York story, so this is really, I think, where the play should go.
Yeah, it's a very interesting take on it. So that sounds wonderful. And what other plays or work are you engaged in at the moment?
So later this year, Fishamble Theatre Company are going to stage my new play, which is set in Downing Street in 1921 during the Anglo-Irish negotiations that led to the treaty. And they're going to stage that in Dublin for the centenary of the treaty in late November, early December. And hopefully there'll be a broadcast, an online broadcast option for that as well. So anyway, fishamble.com will have the details of that later in the year.
Okay, great. And I know that tonight we just saw an excerpt from the play, and you mentioned RTE a little earlier, but just for everyone online joining us tonight, we have 85 people participating. So where can they listen to the full play?
So I'll share a link in the chat, Michael, and if that doesn't go to everybody, maybe you can copy and paste it. But in any case, if you go to any of your podcast provider, usual podcast platforms, or just Google RTE, the Irish National Broadcaster, RTE Drama on One. So that's their radio drama unit within RTE. And the play is the United States versus Ulysses, but just RTE Drama on One. This is they're also releasing this week. They have a lot of archive Ulysses material. So there'll be a bunch of new stuff, but anyway, the play should be fairly obvious there amongst that. And I'll share the link.
Brilliant. Well, very good. And thanks again, Colin, for participating, for helping set all this up. We really appreciate it. And again, special thanks to the cast for performing so late. We really appreciate it. And best of luck to you all with your future endeavors.
Thanks, Michael. Hope to see you in New York next year.
Yes. All right. Well, it's time for some more music now. Iain, I will hand over to you, and maybe you can share a little bit about your music. Iain and Alexandra are joining us live from Minnesota, so we welcome them. And over to you guys to play something for us.
Thank you very much. So thank you also for having us as part of your virtual Bloomsday celebration this year. My name is Iain Dove Lempke, and this is my brother Alexander Dove Lempke, and we are about half of a traditional Irish and Scottish band based in the Twin Cities, Minnesota, called Dorian. And that is, the name is from just the Scots Gaelic word for otters. We are going to sing you a song now. This is an Irish song it's a very well-known Irish song, but if there are any Irish speakers in attendance, you might be listening to the words and say to yourself, that doesn't sound quite right. And that's because I'm actually singing it in Scots Gaelic. It is from the mid-1700s, from a time that both Irish and Scottish culture were being oppressed very deeply. And so this song was written kind of in hope of a restoration of Irish and Scottish culture for the future. And so this is called Le Hiela Mer. Shemaluk Magida Mer, Shemahez Agila Mer, Sheena Shalib Chatud Mi Hain, On Ye Mi Fo Magila Mer. Hami Shoful Longbron, Kuyad Yes a Shilia Yod, Escaskun Haken Gila Kod, Hanyas Gilis Mod Molon, Shemaluk Magila Mer, Shemah mi hein, on ye mi fo ma hila me. Fa mi hor non vaidin he, ne shall min bon trag foch gun steh, ma hedan travak non ton gutrein, har non glan gutsirin kein, shema luk ma hila me, shema heza gila me, shina shalik chadud mi hein, on ye mi fo ma hila me. Marca gosol uvrakog, oi gasta huledoi, sheva helan valedon, kuras ganaija iskalion, shema luk magila me, shema hezagila me, shina shalik chadud mi hein, on ye mi fo magila me. Erach lar sikluk jakjol, liner stoppen lone bost, lon polikas kan skile bron, olar slanch man joven god, shema luk magila me, shema hezagila me, shina shalir chadud mi hein, on ye mi fo magila me. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you guys very much. That was awesome. Beautiful piece. And I think people on tonight's webinar will really appreciate that one, hearing it, the Scots Gaelic version of it. So thanks again. And we'll have another piece of music from Alexandra and Iain at the end to play us out. So stand by for that. So now we turn to this year's keynote address, and we are honored to be joined this evening by Professor Catherine Flynn from the University of California Berkeley, who will deliver a short talk titled The Sounds of Ulysses. Judge Woolsey wrote that Ulysses is a powerful commentary on the inner lives of men and women. And in this talk, Catherine will explore the graphic sounds to which Ulysses gives voice to aspects of those inner lives hitherto considered unrepresentable in literature. Catherine is the author of James Joyce and the Matter of Paris, a book which has been described as engaging, ambitious, thoroughly researched study that makes a significant contribution to transnational reassessments of Irish literature. She specializes in British and Irish modernist literature in a European avant-garde context, and is currently working on the Cambridge Centenary Ulysses, the 1922 text with essays and notes, and a volume titled New Joyce Studies, 21st Century Critical Revisions. Catherine is the Director of Irish Studies at Berkeley, and we are thrilled to have her join us tonight. So Catherine, thank you, and over to you to begin your talk.
Thanks so much, Michael. It's such a pleasure to be here with you all today, and to meet you, to hear the music, to get a glimpse of the play, and to celebrate Bloomsday with you. So in this talk called The Sounds of Ulysses, I'm going to explore Judge Woolsey's account of Ulysses and also depart from it. So as you might have gathered from the performance, for Woolsey, Joyce's achievement was the accurate and honest representation of the actions and thoughts of people, of ordinary people, or even a certain kind of person. Ulysses was thus what he called a serious experiment in a new, if not wholly novel, literary genre. And this is indeed true. For Woolsey, this honest and accurate representation necessitated Joyce's use of what Woolsey refers to as old Saxon words known to almost all men, and I venture, to many women. I want to talk about these words, and also to show you here that what perhaps nowadays feels most obscene and truly groundbreaking in Joyce's representation of the lives of Dubliners in Ulysses is not these Saxon words, actually, not what we would call swear words, but a different kind of word, perhaps more accurately described as a collection of letters. So in this talk, I'll explore the graphic sounds through which Ulysses gives voice to aspects of those inner lives hitherto considered unrepresentable in literature. So some of these aspects are easy to represent, but considered unrepresentable because of a sense of decency. And others are unrepresentable in the sense that no writer had attempted to render phonetically these ordinary sounds. So Joyce had, so let me start sharing my screen. Where is it here? So Joyce had very little interest in Anglo-Saxon swear words. They do feature in Ulysses, but rarely. And when they do feature, they're often uttered by unsympathetic and brutal characters. So, for example, the soldiers whom Stephen falls afoul of when he comes staggering drunk out of the brothel. So I hope you can see this. Let me know if you can. So Stephen talks about independence. He's very, very drunk. My center of gravity is displaced. I've forgotten the trick. Let us sit down somewhere and discuss. Struggle for life is the law of existence, but human philrenists, lovers of peace, notably the Tsar and the King of England, have invented arbitration. He taps his brow, so he's not making an awful lot of sense. But in here it is that I must kill the priest and the king. Sorry, my dog is making noises in the background. And soldiers overhear him, Private Carr tugging at his belt. So this is written in the form of a play script. I'll wring the neck of any fucker says a word against my fucking king. So Private Carr, Private Harry Carr, is an English soldier under the command of Sergeant Major Bennett. But he's named after a real-life figure who Joyce fell afoul of, Henry Carr, an amateur actor who had a minor post in the British consulate in Zurich and who quarreled with Joyce over money. So Joyce uses his name for this ruffian of a soldier. So here we're not on Private Carr's side. He's not a crusader for free speech in the way that we might think of the comedian Lenny Bruce, who told a crowd in 1966 that he'd been arrested for saying 9 words, or a comedian after him, George Carlin, in his 1972 bit about 7 words you can never say on television. This would be a good idea for a pop quiz, I think. What are those 9 words? So Carr is neither articulate nor inventive. And in fact, he's characterized by repetition. So here we have this. Okay, those are the facts about him. Here it is again. I'll wring the neck of any fucker says a word against my fucking king. And then a few minutes later, he says, I'll wring the neck of any fucking bastard says a word against my bleeding fucking king. So he's in fact conventional, even hyper-conventional in his utterances, relying on repetition of standard swear words for effect. We're encouraged to laugh at him here, at his unthinking and indiscriminate use of swear words, defending a king that he refers to as his bleeding fucking king. So in a way, this is like the citizen in the Cyclops episode, who makes a similar unthinking mistake. Here's another bit about the 2 soldiers. Bugger off, Harry, or Bennett will shove you in the lockup. And Carr says, God fuck old Bennett. He's the white arse bugger. I don't give a shit for him. So this is, it's very strange to be cursing so much at you, having just met you and not seeing your faces. Okay, but bear with me. All right, so here's a scene from the Cyclops episode where Bloom is defending Jewish people against the attack made by the hyper-nationalist Irish citizen. Mendelssohn was a Jew, Karl Marx and Mercadante and Spinoza, and the Savior was a Jew, and his father was a Jew. Your God. He had no father, says Martin. That'll do now, drive ahead. Whose God, said the citizen. Well, his uncle was a Jew, says he. Your God was a Jew. Christ was a Jew like me. Gob, the citizen made a plunge back into the shop. By Jesus, says he, I'll brain that bloody Jew man for using the holy name. By Jesus, I'll crucify him, so I will. Give us that biscuit box here. Stop, stop, says Joe. Okay, so the irony is obvious, right? Wanting to attack Bloom for using the holy name when he uses it himself all the time, implying that really only Catholics can use the name of Jesus in vain. So before getting to the graphic sounds that I'm interested in, we should take a look at one key moment in which Anglo-Saxon words feature in Ulysses and which featured in Colin Murphy's play, which sounds really great, Molly's monologue. So here Molly thinks about swearing. She remembers considering swearing at the height of her sexual pleasure. Okay, so I was coming for about 5 minutes with my legs around him. I had to hug him after, oh Lord, I wanted to shout out all sorts of things, fuck or shit or anything at all, only not to look ugly. Or those lines from the strain, who knows the way he'd take it? You want to feel your way with a man. They're not all like him, thank God. Some of them want you to be so nice about it. Okay, so there they are. Those are the words. Molly is in many ways an ordinary woman. However, she's an interesting woman in that she has control over what she says. So in the heat of passion, Molly refuses to swear because of its lack of aesthetic appeal and because of consideration for her audience and her desire to craft her appearance, to stage herself to that particular audience. So now let's turn to the sounds and think about Joyce's new literary experiment, to use Woolsey's phrase, which is, I think, maybe more obscene. We'll start with an easy one. So a very easy one. So this is the scene from Nausicaa, which led to the original ruling of the book as obscene. And Bloom is, let's just say it frankly, masturbating as a young woman displays her frillies to him. She's leaning backwards on a wall. He can see her bloomers, and she knows it. And what disturbed those early readers was not really that Bloom was, at himself, to use the phrase he himself uses, but that Gertie McDowell knew and enjoyed it. That's what truly shocked people. So here is the description, and people have argued about where this comes from, but it's most likely that it is a version of Gertie's thinking. She would have fain cried to him chokingly. She speaks in a very heightened Victorian style associated with women's magazines and romance novels. She would fain have cried to him chokingly, held out her snowy, slender arms to him to come, to feel his lips laid on her white brow, the cry of a young girl's love, a little strangled cry wrung from her, that cry that has rung through the ages. And then a rocket. So at the same time, a fireworks display is happening, associated with the opening of a bazaar. And then a rocket sprang and bang, shot blind blank, and oh, then the Roman candle burst, and it was like a sigh of oh, and everybody cried oh, oh, in raptures, and it gushed out of it a stream of rain, gold hair threads, and they shed, and they were all greeny, dewy stars falling with golden, oh, so lovely, oh, sweet, soft, soft. So here, Bloom and Gertie's sexual pleasure is voiced by the appreciative crowd of spectators who, in exclaiming at the fireworks, seem to exclaim in the way that Gertie herself would. And these O's leap out from the page, I think, and mark this passage as something that it brings it to our attention in a very easy way. This difficult text at these moments becomes entirely accessible. So here's the moment that started me thinking about this. This is right at the beginning. It's not obscene. It's Stephen talking with the Englishman Haynes, who doesn't understand the mental and political bind that Stephen is in. This is Haynes talking, as if everyone can be as free as an Englishman. Yes, of course, he said, as they went on again. Either you believe or you don't, isn't it? Personally, I couldn't study that idea of a personal God. You don't stand for that, I suppose. You behold in me, Stephen said with grim displeasure, a horrible example of free thought. He walked on, waiting to be spoken to, trailing his ash plant by his side. So he carries a stick made of an ash branch. Its ferrule, its steel tip, its ferrule followed lightly on the path, squealing at his heels. My familiar, after me, calling Stephen, a wavering line along the path. They will walk on it tonight, coming here in the dark. He wants that key, it is mine. Okay, on it goes. So here, Stephen's stick, the metal tip on his stick, calls his name. The scraping of the ferrule along the ground as he drags it expresses Stephen's identity. And it's associated, it's spoken in painful tones, in a strange speech that occurs in the present tense, contingently, depending on the surfaces with which the ferrule comes in contact. So this is something that escapes from language, this protracted sound, this cry. And for Stephen, it's something that is irregular in a painful way, that doesn't fit in, because Stephen is a horrible example of free thought. His stick, his familiar, his close friend, his associate, his spirit guide, a kind of demon accompanying him, gives voice to this lack of belonging that Stephen has. Okay, so now on to one of the key examples. So I don't know if you've come across the politician and rebel Robert Emmet before. Robert Emmet was put to death in 1798 for his part in the Irish rebellion, and he made a famous speech on the dock, which was a talisman for nationalists and Republicans for the next 100 years. Let no man write my epitaph, for as no man knows my motives now, for as no man who knows my motives now dare vindicate them, let not prejudice or ignorance asperse them. When my country takes her place among the nations of the earth, then, and not till then, let my epitaph be written. I have done. So, ironically, this is a deeply memorable speech that says he should lie anonymously until Ireland becomes a recognized country. And these words were known to everyone in Dublin. So at a scene at the end of the Sirens episode in Ulysses, Bloom is walking along the street and he pauses outside a shop with a print of Robert Emmet and the lines of his epitaph. And we get this. This is the very end of the chapter. Must be the burr. Ooh, nations of the earth, no one behind, she passed. Then and not till then, tram, cran, 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 good upper, coming, crandle, cran, cran. I'm sure it's the Burgund. Yes, 1, 2. Let my epitaph be written. I have done. So here, you've probably twigged it, is Bloom dealing with gas, which he thinks is from the Burgundy that he drank for lunch with the cheese, gorgonzola cheese. And this, I think, is in the kind of unprecedented representation of a case of flatulence in literature. However, it's not merely enough that it's there. This is becomes a comment on public discourse. And so it's juxtaposed with Robert Emmet's great words. But the implication is that those great words are in some sense hot air. This historical speech is juxtaposed with present day speech, with a kind of expression of the body. But this is not merely just letting it all hang out, letting it rip, so to speak. Bloom carefully considers the timing of this fart. He, like Molly, is very careful about what kind of speech he is making, how he's relating to people around him. No one behind, she's passed, so the woman is gone. Also, a tram is approaching, a very noisy tram that will mask the sound. So it's timed carefully. And it's represented here phonetically in ways that are actually quite difficult to say. This is not a word. It's not a normal thing that one would read aloud. But looking at it, we can see that this is actually, it seems like a pretty faithful representation in letters of what that might sound like. So one interesting aspect of this is the shifting representation of the word in different editions. Here we have the original first edition, Shakespeare and Company edition, and you can see that they're almost identical. And the same, but with an extra F. This might be an example for you of, look at that, academic quibbling, scholars disagreeing, coming to blows over an extra F. It's nitpicking, it's pointless. However, this, I think, illustrates a very important aspect of this kind of word. This is truly free speech. It's not codified, it's not part of a dictionary, it is unique. It's free in formulation, departing from the normal lexicon to venture into something, into the once off. The expressions of the body, the expressions of our bodies, are the opposite of the conventional. They are once-off assemblages. And so these words are once-off assemblages of letters that represent similarly once-off events. Events that require not just idiomatic expression, but idiosyncratic expression. So in this way, Joyce ventures into new, if not wholly novel writing, to borrow Woolsey's words, not just as a literary innovator, but, this hasn't been done in literature before, but in response to the experience of embodied life itself, which is always new and novel, as the body responds to shifting sets of circumstances, comprising of diet, location, time of day, particular microbiome, etc. All right, so this was fine. Now we're going to move on to the most obscene example, which I wish the dog would bark. Key moments. Okay, so here we are in the brothel, back in the Circe episode, which is written like a play script and which is full of waking dreams, kind of hallucinations. And so at this moment, this is a moment of disillusionment in which the madam of the brothel, who had turned into a man, a dominating sadist, who put a terrified and somewhat aroused Bloom through his paces, now returns back to the real-life Bella Cohen, the madam. And it's a horrible moment of bald physical appraisal in which Bloom falls into the logic of materialistic evaluation of the red light district. So the figure of Bella Cohen stands before him. Bella, you'll know me the next time. Bloom, composed, regards her. Passé, mutton dressed as lamb, long in the tooth and superfluous hair. A raw onion the last thing at night would benefit your complexion. And take some double chin drill. Your eyes are as vapid as the glass eyes of your stuffed fox. They've the dimensions of your other features, that's all. I'm not a triple screw propeller. Bella, contemptuously, you're not game, in fact. Here's the bit of resonating. Her sauerkraut barks, verbracht. So, the crudity of this environment is reflected in the stage direction that refers to her private parts and the animalistic phonetic representation of the sound that's emitted by them. This is not something that Bella herself says verbally. There is indeed an Anglo-Saxon word here, related originally to the Middle Dutch and Danish dialect, kunte. However, the focus is not on that word, or even the body part it refers to, but rather on what it says. So Gabler has indeed a correction. So the first edition has this strange veracht, and Gabler has verbracht. It sounds German to me, which is a strange thing to observe. And one can only guess what the French typesetters thought of it. It's ugly and jarring in its guttural quality. It's nightmarish, this event, along the lines of the Circe episode in general. And this communicates not necessarily the power of women's bodies, but rather the horror of women's bodies when they're turned to profit, to exploitation, and the degradation and violence associated with that relation. So Woolsey's argument then maybe misses out on the most important aspect of Bloom's depiction of the hitherto unrepresented or unrepresentable. He shows what is real, what ordinary people experience, but he also shows it in unprecedented ways, and in doing so builds in a critique of it. These representations, these shifting sounds that, I mean, this is the most conventional, this O exclamation mark. These shifting sounds show a world that is transient, that is capable of change. And so the brutality of the soldiers, the pressures on a woman to curate her own reactions in order to appeal to her lover, the horrors of commodified sexuality are all behind the sounds that make Ulysses into a horrible example of free thought. All right, that's what I have to say. Thank you for listening. I hope you're all there.
Wow, that was fantastic, Catherine. Thank you very, very much. Truly excellent talk. And thank you for selecting and sharing those passages and interpreting them for us. I think many on the webinar, you know, they mightn't be as familiar with Ulysses as you are. So it was so nice to sort of see into the book a little bit on this Bloomsday. And of course, what you selected as well was also very apropos for the theme of tonight and our reenactment of the trial. So thank you very much once again for joining us for that. And I can't think of a better way to celebrate the day. And I can see lots of praise coming in on the comments as well. So thanks again.
Do you mind if I just mention my podcast? So I've just launched a podcast on Ulysses, and it's available here. It's on iTunes and Spotify. You can find all the details about it, how it was made. There's an edition of Ulysses I'm bringing out, a reader-friendly edition that Michael mentioned at the beginning. And this podcast features the people who contributed to the edition, but also readers of Ulysses from around the world. So if you want to upload a response yourself, we might be able to feature you in an episode. So www.u22pod.com. Okay, but I should just get that in there.
That's a challenge for all right. Well, we've reached the end of our program now, so I want to thank all of our contributors who took part tonight for your time and for your work in preparing your pieces for this event. Made it a very special event, our 11th annual Bloomsday celebration, and it was very memorable for us. So thank you all very, very much indeed. Thanks to my colleagues on the Irish American Bar Association for all of their help with developing the program. Special thanks to Andrew Lillis, who helps establish the webpage for the webinar. And most importantly, thanks to all of you who've joined us tonight. We had over 85 participants, and so we're grateful to you all for making time. The Irish American Bar Association was founded in 1987. It's a professional organization dedicated to connecting and serving and celebrating New York's Irish legal professionals who are Irish born or of Irish heritage or simply interested in all things Irish. So we hope that you can join us for another event again soon. Please check us out on www.iabany.org. So to conclude proceedings, I'm going to hand back over to Alexander and Ian in Minnesota, who are going to play us out. So thank you all again for joining us, and have a lovely night.
Thank you very much.